Behind me you see the faded glamour of Old Town Havana, Cuba. The spectacle of colors, the crumbling facades of colonial buildings, the streets alive with music and people and markets, and of course the classic cars from the late 1950s, which are in themselves a reminder of the complex and challenging history that this country has had with global trade. But if you look at the story of globalization, Cuba is very much at a key part of that. In fact, it was here in 1492 that Christopher Columbus made landfall, thinking he discovered the continent of Cathay. And of course, after the discovery of the Gulf Stream current, it was through the port of Havana that the wealth of the New World, the gold and silver from Mexico, was funneled to support the Spanish colonial empire and all the problems of slavery and exploitation that came with it. An appropriate, if not complicated, place to consider the question of what is the future of globalization. We're at an interesting point right now in history where there have been growing calls for de-globalization. Following the pandemic of 2020, the explosive and challenges to inflation and living costs as a result of the Ukraine war, the crises in energy and food, there have been increasing pressure for countries to stop producing for global export, but instead to focus on creating goods and services for local consumption. But is this really the future direction of the world after hundreds of years of global expansion? It's a difficult question to consider. Probably the strongest argument in favor of deglobalization is the importance of resilience, how in a time of uncertainty and unpredictability, we should be building supply chains and production facilities that are less reliant on other countries. The problem with this, of course, is that deglobalization itself may be inflationary. The reason why living standards have risen over the years and the cost of goods have become not only more available but cheaper is because of that complex network of global trade. But if you look deeper, the strongest arguments for deglobalization are often coming from very political and nativist and populist sources. The true history of the world is one of which civilization has advanced with greater knowledge through the interconnectivity between countries and civilizations. I mean, starting with the Greek and Roman civilizations, the vast knowledge that was spread through their shipping and trade routes, of course the Italian Renaissance and the rise of the Silk Road and the Ottoman Empire. There's a long history of the exchange of ideas accompanying this exchange of goods and services. So what are we to think that this new period of countries and nation states looking inward would somehow lead to greater prosperity and thinking and innovation? But there's another aspect of this debate which is often missed, which is the digital side of globalization. You know, back in 2010, I gave a speech called the Divergence, where I predicted that rather than a kind of inevitable rise of a global, consistent internet and a coherent web, we might see the formation of clusters of regionally and politically divided webs in Brazil, in China, in Russia and India, and of course here in Cuba. Now, the Cuba's internet story is interesting. They really didn't have the internet until around 2015, and it wasn't until pretty much December 2019 where the mobile internet was widely available. It was like a shockwave when the next generation could suddenly see what the world was like beyond their borders, with both good and detrimental effects to social structure. But the point I want to make is that nothing is really gained in terms of knowledge or civilization when you create boundaries, either physical borders or digital ones. I'm still very much an optimist when it comes to the power of global trade links. You only have to look at the implications at a country like Cuba to see just how detrimental being cut off from a global economy can be, to not only to living standards, but to the advancement of civilization. The question of globalization is so much bigger than just stopping celebrities and billionaires from taking private jets to Davos and Coachella. It really goes to the heart of where development comes from and the power of human ideas. I don't think the idea and the dream of a more sustainable, local world is incompatible with a world that's also bounded by interconnectivity and global trade. To give up on the idea of an interconnected world is also to ultimately give up on the idea of a more open, free-thinking and charitable world, which is inherently more human.